The O'Reilly Factor's on tonight.
We are telling Iran that it can't have a nuclear weapon, period.
The Iranian nuke deal horrifying some Americans, but it will go through. Tonight, we'll have reaction from former Vice President Dick Cheney.
No, this is the question. You cannot deport 11 million. You cannot deport 11 million people. You cannot build a 1,900-mile wall.
Univision anchorman Jorge Ramos, unrepentant after his showdown with Donald Trump. Tonight, Mr. Ramos will be here. Also ahead, a new study says immigrant families use much more welfare than Americans born here. In addition, the Fed say many people on unemployment don't want jobs.
Caution. You are about to enter the no-spin zone. Factor begins right now. Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. The Iranian nuke deal will become reality. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. As we have predicted, President Obama will have enough votes in the Senate to override a congressional veto of the nuke deal he wants to make with Iran. Although some Democratic senators oppose it, at least 34 will follow the president, and that's all he needs. Today, Secretary of State John Kerry said this.
Critics tell us over and over again, you can't trust Iran. Well, guess what? There is not a single sentence, not a single paragraph in this whole agreement that depends on promises or trust. Not one. The arrangement that we worked out with Tehran is based exclusively on verification and proof.
Now, Mr. Kerry is misleading us a bit. Yes, the International Atomic Energy Agency has the right to visit suspicious sites in Iran. However, the Iranians have 24 days to allow such a visit, more than enough time to get rid of incriminating evidence or pollute the site. There are also a whole bunch of other things in the deal that will make it difficult to catch Iran if it decides to cheat. But the real bottom line is that the deal helps Iran and doesn't help the USA or our allies. Everybody knows Iran's a state sponsor of terrorism and is destabilizing the Middle East. Everybody knows that. It will now have more money, weapons, and power to continue doing it. So what does America get? What does Great Britain get? What does France get? The answer is no war, at least in the short term. And that is the reason this nuke deal will go through. The Western powers do not want another war in the wake of Iraq and Afghanistan. No sane person thinks this Iranian nuke deal benefits the West. It doesn't. A recent poll conducted by Quinnipiac asked registered voters, do you support or oppose the nuclear deal with Iran? 55% oppose, 25% support. Fox News poll asked, do you trust Iran to honor the nuke agreement? 75% no, 18% yes. So you can see the folks get it. Talking Points understands the gravity of the situation and wishes President Obama would simply tell us the truth. The deal is to avoid war. Period. Nothing else. And that's the memo. Now for the top story tonight. Reaction with us, former Vice President Dick Cheney and his daughter Liz Cheney, co-authors of the brand new book, Exceptional: Why the World Needs a Powerful America. So, Mr. Vice President, do you believe Senator Kerry is an honest man?
Well, I think he's made other promises that didn't carry through. They said, inspections anytime, anywhere. That was sort of the standard going in. But now, as you said, Bill, they've got 24 days during which they can delay the actual onset of inspections. He didn't talk at all with respect to the problem that this agreement will precipitate, I think, a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. Our friends out there, the Saudis, the Emirates, others are seeing Iran ultimately acquire nuclear weapons legitimized by the United States. They'll go seek their own. They have to protect themselves.
But the other alternative is you don't make the deal, they'll continue it, and they'd have to seek their own anyway. But what I'm trying to get at here is, Liz, there's two schools of thought. One, that the Obama administration and John Kerry knows the world. I mean, he knows, and he deals with these guys, an expert at foreign affairs, that they sincerely believe this is good for America. That's one. That's one point of view. The other is that they don't really care whether our power declines, Israel's power declines, there's more destabilization, as long as they don't have to fight again. They don't want to fight, and they're not going to fight. Which do you come down on?
I think that they were desperate for a deal. And I think that they fell into the trap.
Why were they desperate, though?
Well, I think partly it was the president's legacy. I think President Obama, you had, the Deputy National Security Advisor out there saying that the Iranian nuclear deal will be as important to our legacy as Obamacare was domestically. But I think the problem you've got, Bill, is that the deal makes war more likely. When you look at everything that the Iranians are going to get, when you look at the fact that the ban on conventional weapons will be lifted, the ban on the ballistic missiles will be lifted, $150 billion, which even the Obama administration admits will be used to support terror, and an arsenal of nuclear weapons at the end of the day, probably before. But
they're going to dispute that. They're going to say they're not going to get the nuclear weapons. Now, but the left is so angry about Iraq and Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. All right? Would you see that? Furious. And I include President Obama in that. They're furious about those wars which were started in your administration and President Bush's administration. So they're overreacting. Now, we can't fight ever again. They wouldn't even go after ISIS. They wouldn't even go after ISIS. I mean, that's how timid, and that's the right word, timid they are. Because Iraq and Afghanistan was so bad, we can't get involved again. So it's your fault.
Well, I think what that reflects in part, Bill, is, and the Iranians understood this very well, they never had any intention of keeping a military option on the table.
Why?
Because they didn't think Barack Obama would ever resort to it. Look at what he did with respect to Syria. Drew a red line in the sand. When it appeared that Syria had violated, then he backed off immediately. If you were an Iranian supervising these negotiations, you knew you had nothing to fear.
So you're saying he's weak. You're saying he's a weak president.
I'm saying he's weak. He conveyed that sense of weakness, and what he ended up doing in order to get the deal done was that he gave the Iranians absolutely everything they wanted. Military option was never on the table, and therefore his diplomacy was not effective.
But the alternative, if you don't do the deal, is war, because the other nations aren't going to impose sanctions now. They're not going to reimpose. Russia and China and even Germany and Great Britain, they don't have any heart for it. So you'd have to go with the Israelis, and you'd have to attack them, attack their nuke sites. Would you be willing to do that, Liz?
I think that we have to start by saying the Iranians cannot have a nuclear weapon. And it may be that military action is necessary to prevent them from.
So you would be willing to do it?
I think there's another step first. I would be if it's necessary. The other step first, though, is to go back to the bargaining table and negotiate from a position of strength.
But they're not going to do that. We don't have any strength.
Bill, think about what happened here. Our negotiators gave away, before the negotiations even began, they told the Iranians, no problem, you can continue to enrich. No problem, we'll pay you to sit at the negotiating table. Those negotiations were doomed to fail from the beginning.
And that may be true. But if you walk away from the table, if you don't make the deal, all right, which Obama's going to make the deal no matter what. We all know that. All right, but hypothetically, then Iran's going to go, well, we're going to just get the nuke. And then you'd have to go with Israel and you'd have to attack them.
But remember, Bill, how we have dealt with proliferation in nuclear weapons in the Middle East before. 1981, Saddam Hussein had a program going. The Osiris reactor outside Baghdad, Israelis took it out, military force. 1991, we went in with Desert Storm. We shut down his nuclear program then, military force. When we went in 2003 and took down Saddam Hussein himself, one of the byproducts of that was Muammar Gaddafi saw what we did to him, and he immediately surrendered his nuclear materials to us. He had centrifuges, a uranium feedstock.
But Libya wasn't nearly as powerful as Iran is.
Well, but imagine the situation if, in fact, he hadn't done that and ISIS had taken Libya. They would have inherited that nuclear material.
Well, they might inherit it now.
Well, they might.
Right, but that's what we're worried about.
Because it was surrendered to us by the Libyans.
Right.
And then we went and we got A.Q. Khan because he's the guy who had supplied the Libyans with those nuclear materials.
Do you think Kerry and Obama just don't know this?
They certainly didn't act like it. I mean, the fact of the matter is there's a well-established pattern in the Middle East of dealing with these problems through the use of force or the realistic threat of the
Some on the hard right believe, Liz, that President Obama wants to diminish America on purpose, that he doesn't have, you write a book about exceptionalism. He doesn't believe America's unexceptional. He doesn't want us to be leading the world against these people. And indeed, this is the hard right, he's actively trying to weaken this country. Do you believe that?
I do. And I think that
on purpose, he wants us to be weaker.
Yes, because he very much believes in this progressive agenda, and we detail it in the book, through facts. His notion is America has been a malign power in the world, and he has made that clear in his own writings. He began his presidency by traveling the world apologizing for America. So when you're in a situation where you think the history of this nation has been one where we have been a force for ill, which he clearly believes for the most part, his efforts have been to diminish us. His efforts have been to reduce our footprint in the world, because it also, in addition to making America sort of on a level playing field with every other nation, frees up resources for his progressive domestic agenda.
But also basically because they don't want war. I mean, again, I go back to my main theme in the talking points. They don't want war.
Right, but
they
Bill,
don't want it.
Weakness is provocative.
That is a theory, and it certainly happened in the past, in 1938 in particular.
Right.
All right. The Cheneys have been nice enough to stay for another segment and talk a little politics with them. Then later, Jorge Ramos, who is advocating for illegal immigrants, will enter the no-spin zone. Up ahead.